Every summer I went up north to visit my grandparents in Traverse City. They have a beautiful house on the lake, and it's been a tradition to stay there for a week or two with each passing year. The house was built brand new, but it is entirely furnished with antiques and hand-me-downs from previous generations in the family. I know that apparently sometimes energies or spirits are attached to furniture. Although, whatever was going on in this house felt like something more serious than an innocent spirit bound to an old chair. It felt more sinister, like it lived off of our fear or something. I never personally experienced anything until a few summers back, but my mum claims that she has been ever since the house was built in 2005. I'll begin my story by retelling what she has told me. The house has multiple levels, a basement, main floor, and upstairs. The upstairs extends down one long hallway and breaks up into a den, 2 guest rooms, and a bathroom. The main guest bedroom is directly across from the den, and the other guest bedroom, where myself and my brothers used to sleep, is at the very end of the hallway. My mum said for the last 10 years she would hear people walking up and down the hallways at night. Naturally, she assumed one of us were awake and using the bathroom, but when she would check on us, we would all be sound asleep. She would hear voices at night, sounding like a man but hard to distinguish, and again would assume it was one of us, and would check, only to find us all sound asleep as per usual. This went on every night for quite some time, until the activity started to pick up in intensity. My mum would get worried about us with everything going on, so she would sleep in the guest bedroom with my brothers and I. One night she was laying down, and she heard the door creak open to the room. Suddenly, our dog, which follows my mum everywhere, jumps off the bed and starts growling at the air. And apparently, this went on for more than an hour. The next night, the same thing happened, except you know that sound when the air breaks as you walk past a fan? My mum watched as my dog's head turned as something broke the air of the fan, and a loud pop happened right next to my mum's ear and startled her really badly. This would happen every summer, and it was always getting worse each year. Recently, I started experiencing things myself too. I went up north with a friend 2 years ago while my family stayed back for prior commitments. Everything was normal and I wasn't aware of my mother's stories yet. That is, until my second night in the house. While I was laying down and reading right before bed, I heard something in the hallway. I called out for my friend Tyler, but there was no response. And slowly, the door creaked open, and I called out Tyler's name again, but there was no response. The lights were all off in the hallway, except for the bathroom nightlight, and I saw the flickering of a shadow behind the door. I was certain it was my friend trying to play a prank on me, but when I got up to check, there was no one in the hallway. In fact, Tyler was downstairs taking a shower. I told my mum about this figure I saw, and that's when she told me all of her stories. And now, every time I go up north, I hear things, whether it be voices or footsteps. I also see things, shadow figures and lights that will go on and off randomly in other rooms. But the worst and most serious occurrence happened this past summer. The back guest room gets really humid, so sometimes my brothers and I will sleep in the den. The couch pulls out into a bed and I'll pull out a mattress on the floor and sleep in front of this screened-in porch that attaches to it. Around 2 a.m. one night, just as I was drifting off to sleep, there was a huge boom. I heard something drop, almost sounding like a table was flipped or a sandbag was thrown on the floor or something. It honestly startled the shit out of me, but my first thought was one of my brothers fell out of bed. But my heart dropped when I realized that the sound, it came from behind me, and that I was actually facing my brothers currently. I laid there paralyzed, in fear. What on earth could that be at 2 a.m? It came from the screened-in porch, which is connected by a sliding glass door to the den. As I laid there frozen for a few more minutes, my worst fear came to pass. There were 3 small taps on the glass sliding door directly behind me. It was the kind of sound you hear if you were to tap on a window with your fingernails. I have never been more afraid in my life. It was almost like something wanted me to look at it and turn around, but I refused. I laid there, praying and clenching my eyes shut, pretending that what I heard wasn't real, and I didn't sleep at all. I immediately told my mum the next morning, and she told me that I could sleep in the guest room with my dog and dad that night, and she would sleep on the floor with my brothers. At 2 a.m., just like when it happened to me, she was awoken by a loud thud and 3 taps on the glass behind her, and she never turned around either. What is also really weird is that when she woke up, she checked her Fitbit for the time and it read 2 a.m., but then shut itself off, and it hasn't worked to this day. There is something up in my grandparents' house, and I don't want to go back there this year. In fact, I was actually telling this story tonight at my family party, and it turns out that every single person that has visited my grandparents' house has had some kind of paranormal experience. A lot of them have heard whispers late at night, or footsteps, and my cousin claims that one night he saw a figure sitting in the chair in the den out of the corner of his eye. Some few months ago, a friend of mine in the Navy was given orders to be stationed in Virginia. She had attempted for a while to find a renter for her house, but was unsuccessful. Still hopeful, she offered to let me stay at the place for free if I help her find a renter and keep the maintenance on the place. Additionally, she had to leave one of her cats behind because she had no room to take it. It seemed a bit negligent if you ask me, but it wasn't my decision, and I love cats. Originally, I was pretty excited to live in a house for free. I live in the barracks and it can get cramped being in a small room with another person, so I accepted. When I got to the place, however, I was really disappointed. The house was large, but holy hell was it trashed. There was junk laid around willy-nilly, dust covered everything, fleas were everywhere, and it definitely smelled like cats lived there. This was pretty surprising to me since my friend seemed like she was a pretty clean person. I was sadly mistaken though. Still, I stayed a bit hopeful. It would be simple to get some friends together and to clean the place up and make it comfortable. I helped her finish packing and we sat around and chatted for a bit. That's when she told me about her ex. He was Army, like me, but in a different unit than mine. Originally, he had been charming according to her, but had been unsuitable for her for whatever reason. When she called it off and told him that he had 2 weeks to leave, he became insufferably annoying and childish. He hit her boots, terrorized the cats, left the place a mess, more than it already was, and parked his car behind hers so that she couldn't leave without her pitching a fit. He eventually did leave, and that was the end of it, apparently. After she left, I pretty much stayed away from the place, until the scheduled day for me and my buddies came to clean up, dropping by every day to clean the cat box and feed the cat. One night, however, after dinner with a friend of mine, she offered to tag along with me to go feed the cat. She was one of the people that had agreed to help clean, so I figured it'd be good to let her see the place to plan out what she needed to be done. When we got to the house and stepped out, I remember hearing a loud rustling coming from the surrounding trees. I figured it was some animal. As I think back on it though, it could have been my memory just making the situation worse, but it is a pretty big part of the memory. As I walk up to the door, I felt incredibly uneasy, like something was wrong and that I shouldn't be here right now. But I didn't want to waste my friend's time, so I shrugged it off. I was a bit confused when I went to unlock the door as well. The bolt lock was a bit finicky, and sometimes wouldn't unlock properly, so I often had to unlock it multiple times. That is, turn the lock, try to open the door, and so on until it actually unlocked. This time, however, the door opened after the first turn. At the time, I mostly figured it was just the lock, but in the back of my mind, I pondered whether or not I had forgotten to lock it to begin with. Either way, after entering, I was able to head upstairs to feed the cat, but when I attempted to flick on the lights in the entryway, only one of the two lit up. The other one didn't, so I assumed I must have blown it or something. But when I stepped closer to see, I stepped in a puddle of water, catching me off guard. Upon closer inspection, I discovered that the light fixture was completely filled with water, and some leak from wherever was dripping water onto the floor. Additionally, I heard a light rumbling that, at the time, I assumed was the AC. I knew the AC was right above the entryway on the top floor, so I thought maybe it was faulty or had broken and was leaking. I have never owned my own place, so I don't know the ins and outs of this type of stuff, so this made perfect sense at the time. Great, I thought. Even more issues to address. Still, I was there for a purpose, so I told my friend to check out the place to get an idea of what supplies may be needed to clean it, while I went upstairs to feed the cat. However, before I was even halfway up the stairs, my friend called me back down. Well, she was standing in the kitchen by the back door that led to the porch, and glass from the shattered door window littered the floor. She asked if it had been like that when I last left the place, but I could have sworn that it wasn't like that when I'd left. I mean, after all, I'd only been at the place once or twice since the owner had left, and I was sure that a shattered window would have caught my eye. Judging by the placement of the glass, it had definitely been shattered from outside. What was strange, however, was the door was still locked. Not sure if anyone was in the house, I told my friend to stay there while I checked upstairs. I had no weapons on me, and I doubt the place had any guns, but funnily enough, my friend was really into sword collecting, and many of them were downstairs. So I picked one up and tiptoed upstairs, hoping my childhood memories of stick fighting could possibly help me. Luckily, no one else was in the house, but just to be sure, we both waited outside while we called the cops. After calling the cops, I called up the owner and told her everything that had happened. The obvious break-in was very strange, because nothing was stolen, and the place wasn't in any worse state than when I left, as far as I could tell anyway. The only things out of place were the broken window, that same door still being locked, and the possibly unlocked front door. At the time, I assumed that the water was not associated with the break-in, because with all of this evidence, we assumed that my friend's ex had done it, since it seemed that he either was looking for something specific, or just wanted to be destructive, and probably hadn't even entered the house. According to my friend, he knew that she was gone, but didn't know that anyone was watching the place, so he likely thought that the place was fair game for just vandalizing it. Still, beyond the window, why nor the police found anything else? Well, at least that night, anyway. After this event, I of course was still very uneasy about going back to the place. I'd never dealt with a break-in before, and the then assumption that her ex was just being a dick and lightly vandalizing the place definitely made me not want to stay there for too long for the fear that I might be around when he next decided to come back. Still, the damned cat, no offense to it, was still there, and I couldn't just let it starve. So while the police were tracking down the proposed suspect and the insurance company were getting the information, I still had to go to the place to feed the cat. I couldn't keep it with me because the barracks don't allow pets, and I had no friends that were willing to take it in. I won't lie, I waited a couple of days to go back to that house. I had to work up the courage again. I didn't even live there and the prospect creeped me out, so I can only imagine how I'd feel if it had been my place. But still, the cat needed to be fed, so off I went. When I walked in, the first thing that hit me was the smell. There was mildew and mold, obviously. My barracks were loaded with it. But it was strong enough to even overpower the cat smell. The water leak had become even worse. The hardwood floor of the entryway had begun to warp, and the ceiling was drooping. Something definitely wasn't right. It hit me that this leak was much more serious than I had first assumed. This definitely wasn't an AC issue, and the roaring could still be heard too. Curious now, not as panicky as my last venture in the house, I made my way upstairs, sword in hand. At the top of the stairs, there is a short hallway that leads to the master bedroom. Along the way, there's a storage closet. When I passed the closet, my foot made an audible squelch. There was water here too, which made sense as it was pretty much directly above the entryway, and both the AC and the water heater were in the back of the closet. When I entered the master bedroom, however, there was no water, but the roaring sound was louder and it sounded more distinct and familiar now. It sounded like running water, like what you'd hear from a bathtub. Sure enough, I discovered a door at the back of the bedroom that I hadn't noticed before. It led to a half bath with a toilet and sink, and in that room was another door. And sure enough, the noise was definitely a running faucet. The carpet in the front of that door was soaked beyond belief, and the door was locked. Judging by the placement of the door, the room beyond would have shared a wall with a large storage closet, and the tub would literally be right above the house's entryway, explaining the weird water-filled light fixtures, the drooping ceiling, and the leak. At first, I figured I might as well bust down the door since it was obvious that the tub had long since overflown, and the water damage would already be a nightmare to fix, and a broken door at this point would be the least of the owner's worries. I stopped myself though. I didn't know what I'd find behind the door, and I didn't want to go in blindly, so I decided to call the police again to get an officer to help instead. He was able to unscrew the knob and get it open. Nothing was behind the door, but sure enough, the tub had been running and had overflown. We turned it off, and the officer added more things to the report that had already been opened about the previous incident. Putting this all together, I think it's pretty safe to assume what had happened. The vandal, almost certainly the owner's ex, had broken in that night, probably just before my friend and I arrived. He'd broken into the place from the back door by smashing the window, and had likely left through the front door, which was why it was unlocked. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this next part was during his original break-in, or if he came back later to do it, but I think that while he was in the house, he went upstairs, plugged the tub, turned the water on. The vandal obviously wasn't there to steal anything. Instead, he just wanted to flood the house because he knew the owner would be away, and that water damage is a nightmare to deal with. I'm pretty sure that he did this all in the same night, and that neither the police nor I had discovered the water until a couple of days after, which would explain the leak I discovered the night of the break-in. But one thing that really troubles me is that what if it had been left like that? What would have happened if my friend got back and the tub had fallen through the roof or something? And maybe that was the whole plan anyway. Whatever the case, whoever did this is a vindictive piece of garbage, if you ask me. For about 7 years in my early 20s, I worked as a support staff for a company that provided residential services to people with mental disabilities. It was a pretty cool job, until this occurrence. The house I worked in was dedicated to the care of 14 to 18-year-old boys. We often would receive different clients who would stay with us for any length of time, some short, some very long term. Jeffrey was a 15-year-old autistic teenager. He was a great kid. I'd never had any problems working with him or any issues with his behavior. His parents just simply weren't well equipped enough at home to provide the care that he needed. His family, meaning his mother, father, and sister, would come visit about every weekend, which was nice, considering that some parents dropped their children off and wouldn't even return. Jeffrey's sister was also disabled, but not as severely as her brother. We'll call her Sally. Sally was 20 years old, at least 230 pounds, and more often than not, reeked of body odor. She wore dirty clothes, had long greasy hair, and had a face covered with acne and scars. Sally would always watch me whenever they visited. Not just watch me work, but watch my every move. She would often try to flirt, and it made me extremely uncomfortable, but I would usually just try to ignore it, as she was a family member and wasn't really doing anything wrong. After a little over a year of this, Jeffrey was transferred to another residential house. After he had moved out, he added me as a friend on Facebook, and due to the fact that we no longer shared a professional relationship, I added him back. Jeffrey began to message me no less than 20 times a day. I would reply occasionally. I figured perhaps he wasn't liking his new house, or maybe he just wanted to try and keep in contact or something. I mean, most of his messages were simply, hey, hi, or what's up. But after about a month or two, the messages picked up. There were at least 2 messages an hour, all hours of the day and night. And after receiving a message stating, it's very fucking rude to see someone's messages and not reply, I deleted and blocked Jeffrey on Facebook not long after that. It had gone from being annoying to unnerving. Everything was pretty quiet and had returned to normal for about a month. One night, after work, I came home to my normal apartment. I made myself dinner, played some Xbox and went to bed at about 12:30. Around 9:30, there was a knock at my door. I checked, but there was nobody there. I figured they just knocked on the wrong doors. There were several people living in my apartment complex. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, though, my dog started to growl and bark. I awoke to the sound of a large window in my living room shattering. Well, I immediately turned on the bedroom light and dialed 911. To my surprise, the attempted intruder was caught by security, and surprisingly, the police showed up a lot quicker than I thought that they would have. They assessed the damage and made sure that there was nobody in my apartment or that nothing was missing. Before they left, they brought me outside to see if I could identify the would-be intruder. When I walked outside, part of me was shocked. There she sat, Sally, handcuffed in the back of a squad car. I was able to identify her immediately. In the aftermath, police discovered that apparently she had been planning this for a long time. She had gotten into Jeffrey's Facebook, which he'd not been using for a long time, and every single message was from her. She'd been keeping several diaries and write about me in fantasies, and her tone would often change from happy and loving to angry and disturbed. And she would often write about ending my life. Listening in court to those diary entries was the most disturbing part of all. She was actually convicted to 6 years in prison for breaking and entering, and due to her various diary entries, premeditated intent to commit assault with a deadly weapon. Last I had heard, her family had moved far away, and I can't say that I blamed them. After I found a new place to live, I just wasn't comfortable there anymore.